This is a continuation of the reading of the book by Richard Hoskins called War Cycles, Peace Cycles. As this content is related to the broader scope of understanding macro and geopolitics, I felt this to be appropriate to include as part of the Interchain FM podcast. Enjoy.
Chapter 8. The Samaritan Church Spreads to Italy. The Normans completed their conquest of southern Italy in 1060. They then passed over into Sicily and commenced a crusade against the Saracens there. These Saracens were a mixed breed race, dark-skinned, dark-eyed, and coarse-featured. The war dragged on until 1090. The Saracens came to the Christians with the proposition that if they would be allowed to live in peace, they would submit. Immediately, a great controversy arose among the Christian warriors. Peace that allowed both Saracens and Christians to occupy the same land was forbidden by God. Thou shalt make no covenant with them. They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make the sin against me. Exodus chapter 23, verses 32 and 33. But of the cities of these people, which the Lord thy God doth give thee for an inheritance, thou shalt save alive nothing that breatheth. But thou shalt utterly destroy them, that they teach you not to sin against the Lord your God. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 16 and 18. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. What part hath he that believeth with an infidel? Come out from among them, and be ye separate. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 to 17. But the Norman leaders were war-weary. They made peace with the Saracens and let them remain in peace. Later, the Normans recruited them into their army and moved back to mainland Italy to fight other Christians. The Saracen soldiers from Sicily were awarded lands in southern Italy as spoil and remained there. In fear of the Catholic Church, they professed Christianity and became Samaritan Christians. The word, however, went through the Saracen filter and became Samaritan. Into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not. This is how the Christ-professing Samaritan Church of the Saracens was planted in Italy. Today, Italy's Samaritans are prominent not only in politics and business, but in the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church itself, as well as the mafia. Most southern Italians and Sicilians cannot blush red, and they act differently from the Italians who can. Many still speak an Italian dialect with a Saracen accent. The other Normans who invaded Christian Britain and lived among their own kind have flourished, while their brother Normans who invaded southern Italy and Sicily learned the ways of the inhabitants, and as a consequence have been bred out of existence. The southern Italians and Sicilians absorbed a large number of Jews from Spain and elsewhere. The Jewish population of Sicily alone was reckoned at almost 10% in the early 1400s. Because of this, it is almost impossible to tell the difference between the two peoples by observation, since they have become closely related by blood. On December 31st, 1492, the Jews were deported. Many left for Constantinople and the Pale. Many others had concealed their identity earlier and remained as secret Jews. Section 3. Tallies and Templar Wealth. Chapter 9. Tallies and T-bills. When the Crusaders first left their homelands in Europe for the crusade to the Holy Land, they took with them almost the entire circulating supply of gold and silver coins. This left Western nations, England in particular, with no money. In the year 1100 AD, Henry I, fourth son of William the Conqueror, ascended the throne of England. Finding the treasury empty and his needs great, he cast about for a source of income. Having wise advisors, he soon hit on a plan. The plan, with a few refinements, remained in effect for the next 726 years and can be reinstated tomorrow. He issued tallies. A tally was a stick about 9 inches or so long, with each of the 4 sides about a half-inch wide. On 2 of the sides, the value of the tally was carved into the wood. On the other 2 sides, the amount was printed in ink. The tally was then split in half, lengthwise. 1 half remained in the treasury, and the other half was given to soldiers for their pay, to farmers for their wheat, to armorers for their armor, and to laborers for their labor. At tax time, taxpayers were required to bring in 1 half of a tally to pay their taxes. Woe unto the man who did not have the required number of tally sticks. As a consequence, these intrinsically worthless sticks of wood were in great demand. Gold and silver coins were fine if you traveled abroad for a crusade or something, but at home, if you did not have your tax tally at tax time, you were done. Upon receipt of a tally, the treasurer would immediately match the presented half with the half stored in the treasury. They had to tally, which is what gave it the name. Counterfeiters lost their heads. Actually, it was practically impossible to counterfeit a tally. The wood grain had to match, the notches had to match, and the ink inscriptions had to match. This could only come about if both pieces came from the same split tally stick. There you have it, an inexhaustible source of revenue for the government. The means were available to make tallies as long as there were trees. There was a demand as long as the government required the tallies for taxes. The system flourished as long as tax evaders and counterfeiters were punished, and they always were. For 726 years, the system flourished. Interest in England. Government tally money and usury money cannot exist side by side. Tally money makes usury money look bad because it stays constant, while usury money expands and contracts. The advent of usury money spelled the death of the tally. The process started in 1694 when the Bank of England was chartered. This new type of interest bank was permitted because of a promise made by the pretender to his financial backers before he became king and before he had access to the privilege of issuing the potentially inexhaustible supply of wooden money. When the pretender became king, he kept his promise to his usurer bankers. The days of tally money were numbered. At that time, there were about 14 million pounds in tally money in circulation. In 1697, when the capital of the Bank of England was increased, 160,000 pounds of this new money was paid for with tally sticks. The irritation of having usury money and tally money circulating at the same time ended when Parliament abolished the use of tallies for taxes in 1783. Circulation of tallies continued in the back country of England until 1826. In 1834, the Treasury tallies were burned by allies of the Bank of England. The furnaces which heated the House of Lords were used. The fire blazed up and burned down both houses of Parliament. Tallies were thought to be extinct until a casual discovery in the chapel of the Picts in 1909 uncovered 1,300 more exchequer tallies. You can now see them in British museums. The T-bill. The government has the right to make money. It can do so whenever it chooses. In the United States, the government has authorized its treasury to create treasury bills. These bills are created out of thin air, but they are no less real than the wooden tallies of our ancestors. The $1 trillion question. The government doesn't need to borrow money from the banks of the Federal Reserve and have a debt of over $1 trillion. It can make money instead. All it has to do is make it. T-bill tallies in denominations of $1, $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, and $1,000. Then it can spend them for needed government services and tax them out of circulation again. Our ancestors did it for the first 3/4 of 1,000 years. The reason it isn't done is that the $1 trillion debt pays interest. Tallies don't. If the debt were paid off with T-bills, tallies, someone would be deprived of over $100 billion a year in interest. Where would bankers' profits and the politicians' campaign funds come from if this were stopped? Everyone meets congressmen who pretend not to know what to do about the $1 trillion debt and the $100 billion interest, suggest to them that they take a hatchet, walk in the woods, and find a tree. T-bills are modern-day tallies. They are created money. They are not usury any more than a wooden tally was usury. First entry of Jews into England. The tally sticks were a wonderful invention. They were freely accepted in England. The King of England, however, had to have gold or silver to do business in France. A Frenchman or Italian wasn't thinking about taking in English wooden tally in exchange for his goods. They required hard money, the very thing that had left the country to pay for the Crusades. The frugal Englishmen who owned precious coins kept them. In an attempt to solve this problem, King William Rufus in 1087 opened the doors of England to the Jews under the condition that they lend an interest, a thing forbidden to native Christians, and that further, the king get half the profit. Every effort was to be made to obtain the needed gold and silver in payment for loans instead of wooden tallies. 1096 AD, First Crusade. The Jews became the king's valued unofficial tax collectors, As fast as their usury brought a debtor into bankruptcy, the king got his share. Other conditions found their way into the relationship between the king and the Jews. Whenever a Jew was converted or died, his estate escheated to the king. The Jews could only live in the town which contained an ARCHA, an office in which each transaction with the Christians was recorded by government agents to make sure the king got his cut. In practice, this worked the same way as it had in every other country. £10 lent, a 20%, would require repayment of £20 in a little more than 4 years. £10 at 20% in 4 years. £10 borrowed, £12 owed, end of first year at 20%, 14.4 owed, end of second year at 20%, 17.28 owed, end of third year at 20%, and 20.74 owed, end of fourth year at 20%. If the loan were due in tallies, there was some slight chance that it would be paid. If it were due in gold or silver, there was virtually no chance that the loan would be paid, since almost all gold and silver had vanished from England. The debtor lost all. The king chuckled with glee as he got half. The debtor's choice was then to rot in debtor's prison or put himself into indentured slavery for 7 years to work off his debt. The Jews were estimated to have owned 1/4 of England, a never-ending source of wealth to the king, who made money on every transaction, or whenever a Jew was converted or died, in which case his entire estate went to the crown. In England, the main irritant with the Jew was usury, the thing that caused problems from the first. It was the system he practiced. The people learned to hate the Jew because the Jew meant slavery, economic slavery. The feeling against Jews had risen so high that in 1218, Stephen Langton, Archbishop of Canterbury, required them to wear an oblong white badge so the Englishmen would know who they were and what they did. In 1269, they were prohibited from hiring Christian helpers while working as artisans, merchants, or farmers, since the law states, "Thou mayest not set a stranger's word over thee, which is not thy brother." Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 15. The church added its own prohibitions forbidding Christians to work for Jews, and with promptings from the Pope in Rome, the Jews were also prohibited from taking interest. If they could not take interest, their usefulness to the king was destroyed. Jews expelled. On July 18, 1290, the Jews were deported from England. 16,000 left. This handful was all there were. This deportation was forced on the king by a combination of religious authorities and nobles with the wholehearted support of English freemen. Since the king was in debt to the Jews and was their servant, the borrower is servant to the lender. An agreement was worked out so that they were allowed to carry away portable property, such as British money and silver and gold, art objects that they had accumulated. In exchange, the king received houses, lands, and castles obtained by their usury contracts. All these escheated to the king. Once more, England was stripped of her floating supply of gold and silver.